We're going to start off today's video just a little bit differently than normal. Now, you all know John Pothier. He's in California and he helps me with all the stenciling and decals. These are pictures from his day in the saddle. I don't think he rides anymore, but these are pictures of bikes he's owned. Kind of a cool fairing. To be honest, I've never seen one with that fairing before. Kind of a California look. And of course the one Turbo Steve likes, the CX650 Turbo. John, very cool, and thanks for sharing. We always love to share old photos. That's a great way to start a day as I do some email before I have my coffee. Now sometime in the morning when I'm having my coffee, or even before, I like to look back at some of the other restorations we've done and some of the other repairs. And what's nice about having coming up on 1,700 videos on this channel, there's a lot of interesting stuff. There's a lot of stuff I've already forgotten that I've done, but it's all fun to look back at. But right now we have a restoration in the shop and we've got to go figure out something we can do on what promises to be a really crappy weather day. And it is always fun looking back at some of those old restorations and some of Vlad's restorations and some of Glenn's restorations and Luciano's bikes. I don't even know how many we've done. Vince, a couple of bikes for Vince, maybe more, I don't even know. We don't keep track of it. But anyway, we've got a lot of choices here today because all of these parts have been dry in various times. And as this workbench starts to get filled up, and of course we're going to be bringing more parts in on a regular basis, but today we've got to work around the weather. And the clear that's dried on that has been just, I think our lettering thing is pretty much in the bank unless John comes up with something better. Our carbon fiber part is ready for buffing, but I'll let that dry an extra day or so. But now I just look at that and I think how nice that's going to look. It's going to be in the nose of the bike, under the windshield. That's going to add a nice little touch. And our one-of-a-kind carbon fiber parts, I think they're just going to add another nice dimension to the way this is going to be. And a black fender instead of a flat black fender. Our lower fairing sides, instead of being flat black, they're going to be hopefully highly buffed out black. Buffing is going to be, and what's nice about this, I can do one part at a time, and I can fill in days like today where the weather is really not going to be cooperative. I can fill it in with time. I can enjoy a relaxing day of buffing. I've seen those pictures of John Pothier's old motorcycles. It reminded me, whenever I look at old pictures from my picture album back in the day, and some of them are even black and white, I think, boy, what I wouldn't give to have some of those motorcycles back. Oh man, it makes me sad that I traded them for money. So today I'm trying to plan out a day, and thanks to leapfrogging I think I'll be able to do it. I'm trying to plan a day, get some indoor stuff done. The weather's unpredictable. Another wintry mix is supposed to come our way. And sometimes these wintry mixes turn out to be a wintry pain in the ass, but there's not much you can do about it this time of year. But that's what's good about the way I try to do these things and sequence things, because there's always something on a day like today I can do some buffing. A lot of that paint is old enough to buff now, and I'll probably spend a majority of the day doing that. Of course, the other side of it is Karen has a honey-do list this time of year. There's always shopping at Uncle Giuseppe's or something that I can't live without. And I guess that's a part of life that you don't have much control over, unless you live on a desert island alone or something. And if I have to, I can pull some other parts off the bike later today. We have these side kick plates that I want to start figuring out what I want to do with them while I have the carbon fiber sitting out on a workbench. And our beloved decals, thank you to John Pothier. I think we have that pretty much in the bank, and we'll be able to do that without any problem at all. And this is what happens every morning. Everything's wet. But it has stopped raining, so you never know. And this is my favorite thing. The last of the leaves. When these are gone, I've been raking the crap up out of the pond for so long. And this time of year, oh my God, does that coffee taste good. How's that coffee taste, Santa Claus?
Pretty good, Wendy. Pretty good, pretty good. Go down there and start buffing. Stop being a baby.
And because the number of our house is number 93. 93. What did that tell you? Anyway, we really do enjoy this time of year. I hope it shows on the video. But it's always a good way to get a day started. Checking out our Christmas lights. Getting some emails from our friends with all their old motorcycles that they owned years ago. I bet Turbo Steve would like to have that turbo bike in his collection. Hey, I would too. And no morning would be complete without checking out the birds. We love feeding the birds. Now before I start figuring out which parts I want to buff, here's a good tip that I found. The longer you let this paint sit and the warmer of an area it can sit in, the easier it's going to be. Now some of this paint's only a couple of days old. Some of this paint, once it gets beyond a couple of days, I guess, it really doesn't matter. But here's the thing. All of these parts I want to buff. And I know a lot of people would be very happy with the finish that's on here and they go snap the motorcycle back together. But I want to have this at the highest level I can possibly make it. And that would mean everything's got to be buffed. And I want to try to show the method that works for me. And it works pretty well. Now this is the paper that we've been using the last couple of years, made in Portugal. Indasa, Rhino Wet, you can buy it off the internet. You can buy it at your local body shop supplier. 2000 grit for final buffing. A lot of it you do by hand, but most of it you do with what this is called as a soft block. It's really not hard. You can squeeze it a little bit. You can get your fingers in there for certain things you want to do. Probably $5, and that'll be a big help because what we're trying to do is get everything flat. It's the whole objective of doing the sanding part is to get it flat. Now, even a nice high quality finish, it isn't the shine. The shine, when this paint dries, it's pretty shiny, but it's not flat. It has a little bit of a ripple to it, and what we want to do is, especially on the parts that are going to be very visible, I want them to be perfectly flat. The flatter it is, the more it's going to reflect light like a diamond ring does with facets. We want to put facets in the paint. Just a couple of things, I call them the rules of engagement. Soapy water, couple of drops of Dawn. It's not critical, whatever kind of soap you use. The only purpose of the soap is it breaks the surface tension and allows the grit that you sand off, the little microscopic particles, to float away. When you dry sand, they stay in the sandpaper. When you wet sand, hopefully they float away. That's the whole idea of sanding wet. And there is sandpaper that's made to sand dry. There's sandpaper made to be wet or dry. This happens to be wet or dry. If you're going to do this, you want wet or dry sandpaper. So with a sanding block, I want to pick up all the flat areas. This is the easiest part of all, and it goes very quickly. I always like to do one part in real time or a small part, because what it does, it gives you an idea of how much time is involved. With a sanding block, things go pretty quickly, and they're pretty, I call it easy. Some people find this work tedious and they try to avoid it. I don't. I kind of like the idea that when I'm done with today's session, I'll have some of these parts buffed out and actually ready to put back on a motorcycle, but we still have to deconstruct a lot of the motorcycle before we get to that point. And what's going to happen is at some point in time, almost the whole motorcycle is going to be in a cellar except for the frame and the engine. And when I'm trying to decide when I want to do the wheels, well, that in itself is it will be the focal point of the motorcycle. So, but let me just show this. I always keep paper towels around. If I show it in real life, real time, no camera cuts. A lot of times you have to wait till it dries. You put a little, okay, there we go. Now we're in real time, and you can see that's a sanding block. You can see I can do a little bit more here. Wherever there's a shining spot, I can just, and I'll be very careful about that. But then I've created a facet. A light will hit it and bounce up, like a jeweler would do on a diamond ring. So I will wind up having a lot of flat areas. Now the areas around here I'll do by hand. I always like to wear gloves. It lets you get a better grip on the sandpaper. But I'll be very careful to pick up any spots This spot here looks like it has a little bit of dust in it because we paint outside. See, what this does too is whatever's in this final coat, if we have a couple little specks of dust or fish eyes or anything, we sand them out and they're gone. We don't need a spray booth. Now, a lot of the parts around the edges and around the corners, you have to be careful you don't go through, but if we were to go through, and maybe we will before the day's over, we have a very simple cure. You go take the touch it up, black touches up perfectly, and next time we shoot clear, we'll shoot another coat of clear on it, and that's our fallback position. Now, even when you're buffing, sometimes you can go through on an edge, on a corner, on a mountaintop. Well, that's all part of the skill that you develop. You know how far to push it, and then don't push it too far. Like MotoGP, you want to go as fast as you can, but not so fast that you go over the handlebars. Anyway, I'm trying to pass on this information. And in modeling, this is a skill that you have to be so delicate because everything is delicate. And on a motorcycle, you can just, it's like pouring concrete. You can just keep going. A lot easier to paint a motorcycle than a model airplane, that's for sure. Final thing here, I want to dry the part off. I want to get the buffer ready. There's certain parts of this, the big flat areas, I can do with the buffing wheel. Down in these little areas, I either have to make a tool or do it by hand. Either way, well, I always like to start with a small part and work my way up to bigger parts, but that's just personal choice. Now, if I were to be doing this and I see a shiny spot right here, look, as I speak. Well, I can hit that with some sandpaper now, a little bit, and just finish it up. But I want the whole part to be flat. When you recognize what that flat 2000 grit sanding looks like, the rest is a piece of cake. The buffing will go very quickly. If this part is like a washboard or all orange peely, you're going to be there forever. The whole idea of the wet sanding is to flatten the surface out. So I want to go over to my laundry basket of buffing things. I want to get, see, I always save the old pads. I want to get a brand new pad and get a buffer here. And these are the ones from Harbor Freight. They're about 15 bucks. And if you have the coupon, they're $12 or whatever they are. They work great. They wear out every couple of hours. You know, say you do 3 or 4 cars or motorcycles. May you need brushes if you use it hard, but they still get the job done. Right here, the rules of engagement. A brand new pad, 4CR 8065, parts sanded flat, 2000 grit, and get off the old pad. Save that. Now, what I save the old pads for, yeah, you can clean them and everything. About once a year, I do my minivan and the car in one day. Spend about an hour on each one, get the bird droppings off it and everything. I'm not a fanatic for a clean car, but I know that my cars are going on 11 years old, and they still don't look too bad. Well, one of the things that I become fanatical about as time has gone by, because I really do want the finish to be the best I can make it. And in the beginning, I'll tell you, I used to wash the pads and use them over, and what would happen is every time I put a new pad on, and it's so cheap, they're like 2 for $5 or something, I said, what, all this time, all this money, all this energy, and I get scratches. And the whole idea of doing what we're doing is to make it as good as you possibly can. If you just want a factory finish, well, it's a whole different ballgame. I don't want a factory finish. I want it to be better. Now, there's a million different ways of putting this stuff on, and I've seen people that really do know, the guys that do Ferraris and stuff. Ammo NYC, for instance, they really are fanatical about it. They have their own line of products, so I'm not sure. All I know is this is a system, and I like to show it on every video, and I like to show it in real time, and not try to compromise it or try to make it any cuter than it is, or put camera cuts in or dancing bears or whatever. What I do like to do is, that is, certain parts of this in here I'm going to have to do by hand, but if I can get the compound on it, this just makes it, try to make it as easy as possible. The work is hard enough, you don't have to invent ways of making it harder. So another thing I want to get, well, I'll get it later, I'll get this buffing going. I want to get a clean microfiber that hasn't been used to, you know, to clean a sewer or something. And let's just see how long it takes for this to come up. Brand new pad, 4 CR, and 2000 grit sandpaper. And it is, in the very beginning when you do this, it's kind of boring. But what happens is as you start to see the parts shining, now a lot of this I have to do by hand like it's a model airplane, but the parts I can do with the buffer just makes it that much easier for me. And I say it all the time, and I kind of try to put all of these tips on every video because I realize there's some people that may not have seen another windy video and they need to have that information. They want it. It's nice knowing that so many people that have picked up this information, and I'm going to see one of them tonight. Glenn is stopping by for dinner, so he learned how to paint very quickly. Najat, all the people in our circle of friends. And it's always fun sharing it with them. To me, it's the equivalent of if you were a decent cook. Like I know Joe Roselli's a really good cook, and you make a meal for somebody or whatever. You're really proud of what you've done. And this paint thing is my baby. I have loved to have shiny things my whole life. It's true, it's true. Now let me get it. I didn't have this set up right. I don't have a new one here, but this'll do for what I want to do. By showing it in real time, and people can absolutely believe that you're not lying or saying something. Now, this needs a little more work. I cut this off just a little too soon, but I guess that's a good way to show it. See, the middle is not really buffed as much as it should, but the outer part is. It means this whole part has a little belly in it. Now, the choices I would have on a case like this, I can use the edge, or I can just buff the middle of it. I may as well show this, since we're on a no camera cut scene here. Let me just get this in such a way I can show this. And if you do this, in my case, you just pretend it's a model airplane. And we used to have to, in the years that I competed in model planes, boy, oh boy, a lot of elbow grease, a lot of nice big bicep muscles. Anyway, you'd never use a buffer on a model plane. Well, the people that did paid the price. I didn't. I like to do it all by hand. And those wheels that are on the FCR wheels buffed by hand. Kind of like that. Now let's see. How quick did that come up? Okay, I probably got 80% of it there just in that short amount of time. I don't want to let this run forever, but there'll be a flat spot I could do here. Some of this I can do, but then all the edges I'm basically going to have to do by hand. But I'll do one part. I don't care how long it takes, because I'm not doing this like I'm doing it to get a paycheck. I'm doing this because I want to do it. So this is one of the tricks I use to get in areas that I can't realistically get to with my fingers. Of course, I got fat fingers. That's the reason. So there's some little areas down in here that I can polish. I'm not sure I can show this. And it just takes time. All of these things just take time. But once the buffing is done, then this part, and one by one, we'll try to do as many parts as we can today. You never know. You never know when this day could end. Christmas time, people come over. Our family has things to do, but that's the nice thing about a job like this. I can stop anytime I have to, and I can just come down for an hour and polish away, and come springtime, we should have a really, really nice finish. And what's nice about this finish, it is very easy to maintain and keep it beautiful. Because what'll happen is you'll get road salt or grime or bugs on it, and when you wipe it, a little bit of Meguiar's cleaner, whew, right back to being beautiful. Year after year. Now on a part like this, there's always some little edges and corners and things that you just can't reasonably get by machine. And if you, like I do anyway, I candle a part, look up to the light, and I see little spots I missed. Because at this point, we're pretty much done with this part. And because of leapfrogging and sequencing, we can do as much or as little of this as we want. And another thing, too, that happens with leapfrogging, when you do a restoration the way I do, where you take it apart in pieces, what happens is you don't get bored as easily. See, if you pull a whole bike apart at one time, and you have parts all over your shop, assuming you have a nice big shop with fluorescent lights and everything, and then you start to buff, the sanding, if you did all the sanding, then all the painting, and then all the buffing, it just gets boring. It turns into Groundhog Day, where what we try to do in the shop here is every day do a little bit of something, do a little bit of buffing every day, a little bit of sanding, some painting when the painting's appropriate. It looks like our wintry mix is coming any minute now, so I know I'm not going to be able to paint today. I don't want to get set up to paint, but this kind of work I can do, and here's the nice thing, is I can pick away at any little spot. The buffer usually won't get in the corners unless you want to run a high-risk thing of buffing right through. But all these little spots you can do by hand. And actually, you could do the whole thing by hand, just like I did the FZR wheels. It just takes time, and you have to have patience. But the main thing you need is passion. It's really a question of being fussy, and every time I pick up a little spot and say I'm trying to look at it, I'm candling it up on a light and looking for any little spot I missed. Because once you have it, you have it. It's not like, I don't know, what would be an example of something? Like you put a tire on a bike and 3,000 miles later it's worn out or something. This is something that's going to stay with the motorcycle. Who the hell knows how many more years we all have to live, especially me. But while I have it, I'd like to have it as shiny and nice looking, easy to maintain, and it's just my passion. That's all there is to it, to have these things. When I was young, I saw people at the national championships. When I was 14 years old, they had shiny model planes, and mine wasn't that shiny, and I was determined the day will come. And it did. Now, I always say, it's up to you to see if it's worth it to do this, or if you don't have a passion for it. But in my case, I have a passion for it, and that's the way I'm hoping the whole finish on the whole motorcycle that I do in this Bentley black and that custom gold I mixed, I hope the whole bike's going to look like that come springtime. And I'd be willing to bet it is. Now, a part like this, there's a lot of flat areas. A lot of this area I'm going to have to get in, and there's a lot of little detailing I'm going to have to do. But the whole point here is if you try to race through it, and if you do, when you race through it, in the end, you're always sorry. I don't know how many times, boy, in my lifetime, I've said, oh, I'll get this done by lunchtime, I'll get this done by this afternoon, or I've set some artificial deadline, like I was working on piecework. First off, I didn't enjoy it. I enjoy it. This is relaxing to me now because I'm a very, I don't know what I am. Whatever I am, I do enjoy this as my relaxation. Some people enjoy, beating up children or whatever. This is my relaxation. Now, once I'm going to do this part, all of the little oddball ends of it. And I got to work my way around. Of course, I'm going to shut the camera off. We've already done a real life one. Get in here by hand, around the edge. Try not to go through. We know there's some Bondo here. Be careful. And then the last thing, block sand all the flats. But the whole idea is to be patient and not try to set artificial deadlines. I don't care how many parts we get done today. This is filler time until Karen comes down with the honey-do list for the day, and you never know when that's going to happen. Or if we have to go to Uncle Giuseppe's, that could even be better than the honey-do list. Now, every part is just a little bit different. This part's going to have some tricky little areas, but the whole key to everything that I have found over the years, many, many years of doing this, over 50 years, is if you're not patient, or if you're in a rush, or if you'd have a false deadline to meet, if it's like you're working for the post office or something, it's just so counterproductive. What I like to do, and I think it's the biggest lesson you could pull off of maybe some of these videos, maybe this one, is you just have to take your time. Good buffing, like good dental work, just takes time. And there's certain parts of this you can do very quickly. Certain parts, like around the edge, you have to do by hand. But basically, the majority of it, you've just got to have a cup of coffee, relax, and do it. Spring is coming. 3 months from now, 4 months from now, flowers will be blooming, and things will be done. I don't have to have it all done this afternoon. So anyway, I wanted to mention this thing, and I think this is really appropriate. It's stuff, it's actually information I think anybody can use here. That there is a show on Netflix called Happy. Just one word, Happy. You look at it, and you think, I don't even know if this is worth watching. It's worth watching. And I won't let the cat out of the bag, but trust me, if you like something that you can really wrap your head around, this show, Happy, is worth it. It changed my life when I looked at it. But here's the point. Karen and I watch a lot of TV together. We watch a lot of YouTube, of course. And here comes up on YouTube this great show about this guy, and I guess he's in Saudi Arabia somewhere, and he's got a Bugatti, a custom-made Bugatti that, of course, a regular one is only 4 million. This is 10 million, and he's showing his car collection and millions of cars and Ferraris and this, and it's in a white building with white tiles, and and I'm just looking, and Karen reaches over and says to me, "Honey, do you think he's any happier than you are?" And I said, you know what? I got my rusty motorcycles. I got my can of rubbing compound. I got Luciano and Glenn and John Pothier and the gang that couldn't shoot straight. I mean, come on. This poor guy in Saudi Arabia, he'd probably be tough to negotiate to switch for my life. That's a true story, too. Anyway, I think that looks great. I think we're cooking with gas here. I know this may be a little boring, but there's some spots on this, and I know in any low valley like this, the buffer can't really get in there all the way. So I know I'm going to have to do the last little bit by hand. I don't want to take a chance. See, if I put the buffer in there and I start squeezing, I don't know, you can burn the paint or whatever. But I always like to do, at the end of working with the machine, just sit here and detail a part out. I know I'm going to have to get around here by hand, around in here by hand, and it's going to take some time. It's this part of it just takes time, the edges. Now what happens if you have a part like this and you start, let me just give a demonstration, you start buffing out here, there's a good chance you'll break it because the buffer has a lot of power to it. So when you're doing a part like this, you always want to lay it down against the table. Probably better to do it by hand. And in the worst of all worlds, if the buffer right now, if they shut the power off in the house and I had no electricity, I don't think it would matter at all. I could do this in the dark. I can pretty much work just really not in the dark, but with one candle. Now I can see I got a dull spot there, and this is what happens. That you always have the final part of it is detailing, and detailing out these parts, time consuming. But it's like detailing a car. If you have a car for a car show and you detail it, well, that's part of, you're supposed to be doing it because you enjoy it, not because you don't enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then you should be doing something that you do enjoy. Now, whatever that may be, I don't know. But anyway, I think from this video and from it's going to be 1,700 videos by the time you watch this, what's going to happen is you pick up some ideas from each video, and then when you go to do a job like this, you remember, oh, that's a good way to save time. Oh, that's a good way to save energy. And you can do it a lot more efficiently. But in the beginning, boy, it can be inefficient. And it can take a lot of time, but as you develop your skill, and as you learn little tricks you can do. Now, here's another valley. Anywhere where there's a valley, I know innately I'm not going to take the buffer. I would rather spend 5 minutes this way and not have to do a paint repair. But the good news is, and it's especially good with black, boy, if I were to go through on a paint on any part, just going in, airbrush in, and put another coat of clear on, just so that black is sealed. And and then rebuff it out. But if you don't have to do that, of course, even better. Anyway, the whole point of doing this is just if you see the technique and you see it. Now, I don't know when the clock is going to run out here because, of course, we're around the Christmas season. I have my grandson coming over every day and family people and it every day. And I love it this way, that every day is an adventure. But buffing I use to fill in gaps of time when I can't paint. And today is one of those days where painting's not going to be possible. But the next day it is possible. We'll do some painting. But we try to get, I call it sequencing, leapfrogging, call it whatever you want. Try to use the time efficiently, and at the same time you're being efficient, make the jobs enjoyable. It's enjoyable to do small parts one at a time, 2, 3 a day, 4 a day. It's not enjoyable to do a whole motorcycle without having a coffee break. It's, well, not for me, it's not anyway. So I was hoping at some point in this day it would clear up. No real reason. Just a terrible day. No chance of getting any painting done today. And that's what's good about having the system we use, that we're able to buff today. And the lesson here is, on a rainy day, just detail, detail, detail until every part of that is the way I want it. And if it isn't, we'll fix it. Now I got this nose piece, and I wanted to, as probably the last thing I'll get to do today, I wanted to get it sanded down because there's still little traces of fish eyes in it, little dust. And if I have to, I'll sand it flat, and if all the fish eyes don't come out, then I'll put one more coat of clear on it. If they all come out, I'll try buffing it. We'll see how it buffs out. And of course, the good thing is, even after I buff it out, I can go back and put more clear on. I just have to degrease it thoroughly. But now this paint is not that old. It's only 2 days old, so it might still be a little soft, and you can tell when you go to buff it right away. If it doesn't come up, let it sit a couple more days. That's the bottom line on all of this stuff. There's always a big argument, and I don't know, people in professional body shops, they cure the paint with heat lamps and everything, and they say, another thing too, they put on a lot less paint. They put on the minimum amount they need to put on because, let's face it, paint is expensive. If they could save $100 on putting paint on, that's in their pocket. So the point I'm making is, though, my way of doing things, I put a lot more physical paint on. That's one of the reasons I always like to let every coat dry in between coats, and that's old school, not new school. I try never or seldom to cure something with heat unless there's a compelling reason. So my technique, and of course the difference is, I'm not trying to make money. I'm not trying to turn this into a profitable business, and if I was, I'd go back to having a machine shop. It would have made a better choice for me anyway. But it'll be an interesting thing here. I'm going to sand this. I'll get a little more of it done off camera, and we don't have to do this in real time. We've done enough real time stuff. But I think this one little piece, when it's underneath the windshield and the sun hits it, it's going to add a nice little custom touch that I know I can hear it already. People that have this exact same bike, the first question they looked at, like, hey, where'd you get that fake carbon fiber thing? And see, everybody thinks it's that toilet paper you pull off and stick to stuff. This is real carbon fiber. And that part block sanded out reasonably well. I'm going to try buffing it out. And that part's only dry a couple days, so I think that's going to be fine. And I think we have just enough time to buff that out today before we got to get ready for Mr. Glenn. I haven't seen Glenn in a long time. We're going to see how this is going to buff up. Now, if this doesn't really take a shine the way I expect, it'll be a simple thing. You just put it up by a heating vent for a day or so. And when you do that, just letting the paint harden up, go through its hardening cycle, usually helps a lot. We'll know right away. And of course, whenever you're doing carbon fiber, you want that finish to be flawless. Shiny and flawless. We're going to know in about 2 minutes, we're going to know one way or another. And by the way, that show on Netflix, Happy, is really worth watching. And one of the things you'll take away from it is what it takes to be happy. And it's not what most people think. Well, let's just see what we got cooking here. I'm always excited to see. It never gets old to me when you can bring up the port. Well, that certainly put a nice end to today, getting that done. Whoa, that came out nice. And it seems like I might have waited a day longer to make the paint a little hard. A little bit harder, but it's still buffed out. It's just a little extra work when you're kind of rushing like this. But I wanted to see for my own. I always like to know about this stuff. I don't like to take other people's word for it. Yeah, I think that's gonna add a nice little dimension under the windshield. So this was a relatively productive day. Got to use a day that rain and a wintry mix is coming, so we may be buffing for another couple of days. But that's the whole idea of doing things with sequencing and leapfrogging or whatever. That we're not restricted by the weather as much as we'd be if we were pulling a whole bike apart. And today we woke up and we're ready to paint or prime and we couldn't do anything. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and of course, have a great Christmas, and thanks for watching. And of course, the One Turbo Steve likes the CX650 Turbo. John, very cool, and